Hello, everybody. This is a male space, and we're here with another episode of the Mansplainers. Subscribe if you want to get the top-notch information on men's issues and sexual politics. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Stephen Baskerville, and our guest is Curt Doolittle. So please introduce yourself, Curt.
Hi, I'm Curt Doolittle. I'm a serial technology entrepreneur, mostly in uh, dealing with Fortune 400, high-level issues. We build technology companies, but technology is really just a means of behavior modification within an organization, right? I mean, that's really how you think I think about it is behavioral organization through transform behavioral transformation through technological implementation. Anyway, so I retired. I've been working on a problem for most of my life. I only started working on the male-female problem around 2020 specifically. But I'm based, you would call, it's not really true, but you would call me a philosopher and social scientist because if I tell I work in formal science of decidability, that doesn't mean anything to anyone. So, philosopher and social scientist is best. So that's really what I do. I started the Natural Law Institute. What's we do research. I started a company called Reality by Chanting, which produces a platform. And of course, today I run Runcible Corporation, which is an AI that doesn't lie to you, which is you would not believe how hard that is. They just the, if you train an AI on the corpus of human knowledge consisting of ignorance, error, bias, and deceit, then you're going to get an AI that practices ignorance, error, bias, and deceit and pandering. Excuse me. Anyway, so that's what I do.
Oh, okay. Thank you for being here. Now, what I've been reading some of your content for some years and viewing your videos, and what struck me is that if I have it right, is the Natural Law Institute a think tank that blends the study of anthropology, history, sociology in one to have a better society, to have a fair and functional society? Because at this point, it seems that sometimes I even question if I'm living in a society. So, uh,
Yeah,
so is that
you
what
aren't
this?
really.
Yeah. So is that what the institute is about?
This student formed as a vehicle for the research and development, but the technical, you are correct in your interpretation of the application. In specific terms, I work in what's universal commensurability and decidability, which is basically how do you make law so it's not interpretable,
Okay.
right? And so that it's basically conformative to real human behavior. And so that's what I actually work in. But it doesn't matter if you say that and people don't understand it. So mostly what I talk about is how that knowledge fixes social, political, economic, civilizational issues. And of course, we're in near death throes at this point, which you guys are very aware of, I'm sure. So it's sort of your raison d'etre. I work to create the institutional solutions in the form of law, which is essentially human engineering at scale, to bring about the changes necessary to make sure we don't go away.
I see. So what?
Yeah, does that make any sense at all? Even though I don't know, I have this belief that I mean, Steve is an intellectual, right? I have I always wonder, do people understand like 10% of what I say? I have no idea really. I just do my best.
I
Well,
do.
you're wading into areas that I have to say I don't have a lot of experience with, and the description I'm afraid yeah reflects that these are just not areas that I know. But I would like it. I know you talk about a lot of things besides men's issues and besides sexuality and gender issues, but you also speak about those very I thought very in a very well informed and insightful way. So I'm hoping that you can connect some of those, of course, are the issues that most interest our audience. But I also hope you can maybe talk about those in such a way that you connect them with some of the larger issues that you deal with and how they
Sure, sure.
connect. Because this is something that I've tried to do in my own work. We try to do it on this show. We try to get beyond the telling people what they already know, telling people, more complaining about the unfairness of the way men are treated
Yeah,
and
I don't go there. I
Yeah,
just I deal with
yep,
cause and cure, right?
exactly.
That's what I deal with.
And I think the more you can connect that, if you can tell us how that fits in with some of your other insights and some of the other things you work with, I think that's where people might be able to get a different perspective on the issues which otherwise we all think we're familiar with, but
Okay.
it
Right.
all requires that we have.
I have a starting framing that tends to help with that quite a bit.
Okay.
So, all right. So, I mean, in other words, I can frame the discussion to suit I can frame the way I talk about it in order to suit what you just asked, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
I hope you'll feel free to please do that because I think connecting what we know with the things that we don't know can be very insightful for people.
you mean we can't just sit here and trash talk about nonsense for an hour? That's right.
Well,
Well, we could,
yeah,
but it wouldn't be as valuable to you, your audience.
right,
I mean, I might enjoy it as much,
right.
but it will help your audience. So,
Right. But I hope you'll feel free. So what was it from your previous work that you'd been doing? Because you said you'd only been getting into men's fathers issues in the last 6 years or so, since 2020, I think you
well,
said. What was
I've
it
been
that pushed you into that led you to expand into that, I guess I should say.
well, the source of my work, which I'll get to, is sex differences in cognition produce manifold consequences, and so I actually work from that premise. What I didn't look at and try to understand was what you guys are dealing with. It is the practical reality of how much it really is horrible for the younger generations. I mean, I'm not in the market, so to speak. I mean, not that I wouldn't be. I can't afford the time. But so I've been married, what, 3 times, and I have kids and stepkids, and so I've been through my understanding of relationships. But I don't think I had a feeling for how awful it was for younger guys till frankly, people asked me to address the issue. And they started asking me in 19, and I didn't feel I mean, my head was more still in constitutionalism at that point. But starting at about 20, I started to really address it from their perspective as well, which actually depressed me for about 6 months. It was really sad. I felt terrible for them. I didn't go through any of that. I mean, I grew up in the seven. I had came to
Yeah.
maturity in the 70s, and boys and girls, we liked each other. We didn't have the fat apocalypse yet. We didn't have feminism. It was only beginning to take root around the 1970, 71, 72, and because of the availability of the pill. And we didn't have so many forms of media and information saturation so that we could spend time on things avoiding each other rather than actually getting to know each other. And so, I look at the dating over the 60s, 70s. I mean, of course, I understand it earlier than that, but I mean, in my own experience, and I look at guys today, and I mean, I don't know why they give a shit about society at all. It certainly isn't doing anything for them, and you can see that as the disconnect widened. I wrote a I started a blog in which I couldn't keep up because I had too many things pulling at me. Called A Market for Affection, and I said women create the market for affection. If they don't create that market, men are fucking happy on their own. So the problem is we no longer have generations, and when you've built a society and a government and an institutional infrastructure that requires intergenerational funding, that just means you go away really fast, and your whole society comes to an end. Because not only have you gone into debt by fiat capital, you've not only have you gone into debt by generation of intergenerational debt, but you have stopped people from the habit of saving in order to produce the consumption that allows the production of the taxes, which allows the buying of votes, basically. So, I mean, it's just a horrible sequence altogether. On the other hand, every time mankind has increased the scale of the division of labor such that we have surpluses, so that people can fill additional niches. The first being, of course, we got priests and that kind of thing, and then we got chieftains and warriors, and eventually manors, and then cities, then complex divisions of labor, and then elites, and all sorts of other. It just grew forever. So every time you add a population, there's a time between, excuse me, there's a point at which you have developed enough of a cadre that can implement some kind of order, especially intergenerational order, right? A class of people. We're going to call them elites for safety's sake, but you develop this class. But every time you get wealthier, you add more people to those people who are not just living by subsistence, but they have interests that are beyond the self, and they want to pursue influence and power to advance those interests further. So history consists of us adding layers to this, very slowly, frankly, adding layers to this pyramid. And we got quite a bit of difficulty when we added the middle class, right, during the Enlightenment. And then we got another bit of difficulty when we added the working class during the Industrial Revolution. And we got another layer of conflict when we added women, especially because the primary difference between the sexes is the burden of responsibility is shared for everything outside of the self is largely the product of men. And the burden of responsibility for women is limited to themselves and their offspring. Mm. And so while you have less burden of responsibility between the martial class or administrative class elites, the upper middle class of professionals, the middle class, the people who run things, the upper lower class, which is the people who are the craftsmen who run craftsmen, whatever, and the working classes, right? You have a difference of interests. Those are essentially male interests. But the minute we added women to it, now it became, not only do I want to not have responsibility, but I actually want to force that responsibility indirectly onto men through government. So we've had this. Then once that happened, we got the 70s, 60s, and 70s, where women began to dominate education and have degraded the quality of education consistently since then. And because of that, they've degraded the quality of the workplace. And of course, as a consequence, they've degraded the quality of the polity. And so I don't see what we're going through as terribly different from the transformations in history. I see that the responsibility necessary for shared governance or even shared society, once the inclusion of women is produced, had an extraordinarily deleterious effect that many women warned us about. And we has essentially ended up in hyper suppression of male behavior and hyper licensing of female hyper suppression of male, what is the women perceive as antisocial behavior, but hyper acceleration and hyper distribution of female antisocial behavior, which we see in the canceling culture, right? We see in extreme feminism, we see in hyperconsumption, divorce behavior, irresponsibility, hyperconsumption, hypergamy, and all the other female traits. So in the sense of for men, it's become who were rather optimistic, foolishly optimistic, about the inclusion of women in these matters, primarily because what we learned during the wars was that adding women to the workforce had been relatively positive. What's ended up over time is, as women permeate institutions, it's been extremely deleterious, and this has ended up in combination with the offshoring begun in the 1980s. Labor arbitrage is the correct way to look at it. That we have had a feminization of society, which you guys talk about, that has basically turned society into a very selfish, hyper-consumptive environment, completely unable to maintain the individual responsibility for collective good by the demand for responsibility, and that's the important part. Men demand other men be responsible. Oh, we are not very nice to them. And women don't demand women are responsible. Matter of fact, they don't demand anybody be responsible. So you end up with persistent recursive immaturity, or what we would exaggeratedly call infantilization. So in the sense of what we're going through is a normal problem, the real issue is we don't seem to be able to control it. And it's because we have allowed people to vote and implement votes without demonstrated competency in the burden of responsibility, which is frankly what property ownership originally did. If you could own property, you could demonstrate the fact that you could carry a burden. If you could serve in the military, you could fit in a burden. But if you couldn't do either one of those things, we had no proof, in other words, other than opinion, by some sort of evidence that you were capable of bearing the responsibility for the commons, right? And so we've extended the commons to not only women, but to classes of immigrants who are not from high trust polities, who do not have advanced institutions, rule of law, or shared responsibility for commons. Instead, they might have tribalism, which is the antithetical to the commons, or they might have familialism, which is this attempt to avoid responsibility of the commons. You could have a high trust society like the West. You could have less so like the Russians. You could have face before truth of the Chinese, or you could have facelessness of the Arabs. Right, you get down to facelessness being that it's actually still honorable to lie, cheat, and steal and get away with it on behalf of your family. Or you get down to the Africans, which they don't have any concept of the difference. That's I'm stating this in 1920 terms so that the contrast in our historical cultures is visible. But so in these senses, we're sort of going through what's expected to go through. We have just set up our institutions with foolish Christian optimism, combined with foolish progressive optimism during and after the industrial revolution, with feminine incapacity to comprehend the consequences of their behaviors. And we've sort of created a perfect storm that's asking for us to go the way of the Spartans, which is that they eventually had killed so many of their men that the women ended up owning all the property, and that was the end of Sparta and the government.
Could I ask you about that? There's a couple of things you brought up that were interesting. Like you, I think I'm of the generation, and back in the 60s and late and into the 70s, when feminism was demanding its place, that we kind of naively thought that this was well, there was a whole lot of agendas going on at the time. They'd already prepared the way, radical agendas, racial equality. There was this sexual experimentation, which started out, I think, in a very apolitical, non-political way. And there was, of course, you had the beginnings of environmentalism, you had the anti-war demonstrations, the radicalism on the campuses. So we all kind of welcomed the 60s. I think it's difficult for people, even Bradley's age, maybe and younger, to understand how naive this seemed. It all seemed so.
Oh, it's profoundly naive. It was profoundly naive, profoundly optimistic, but we're freaking human. I mean, every civilization that gets a chance to do stupid shit does. I mean, this you look at the Spanish when they got all the gold from the New World. They basically torched their culture. They torched it. They haven't recovered from it since. They used to be hardworking people like the Germans. They get all this gold in there, and they get this attitude that we can that we don't have to be responsible or anything, or that the Mediterranean life will go on. And all of a sudden, you turn people who are part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire into God knows what, sub replacement for Italian serfs. They're incomprehensible. I mean, you can destroy your civilization really easily.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. Is it seems like that's what we're doing. I don't think anyone really saw what feminism was going to morph into today. As you say, where it's just completely where the relations between men and women, especially young men and women, are just in complete free fall. and they're just complete nihilism. And so I wanted to ask you, is this over? I mean, you say it's you draw parallels with other, other drastic changes in our society, like industrialization and the working class and the middle class. But in this case, do we know where it's going? Do we know where this is going to? Is there any indication that it's going to end, or that it's not going to get much worse? That this is something we can stabilize, or is it out of control?
We can stabilize. The question is, will we? I mean, it's not hard to stabilize it. Do we just go have 5 million of us show up in DC for 3 weeks and it's over, because the government folds every time that happens. The question is, will people do that? And is there clear enough answer that they want to buy into to do it? You don't need a lot of people to make this level of change. You just need a lot of people willing to put up the risk to make that change. In the sense of that's the answer to the outcome of your question. The first one, part of your question was, what do we know where this goes? And you can always play the correct game of not trying to narrow it to this is where it goes. You try to look at the field of possibilities. It's almost certain it leads to civil war. That's almost a given. If civil war is an opportunity for the restructuring. It could lead to rebellion, which is less so, which would lead to reforms. That could lead to a doubling down on what the conservatives are trying to achieve right now, which is purging the government of this progressive nonsense. Which is true. I mean, academia is turning around. Even women, there are female scholars now, which I follow very closely, who are saying, we kind of blew it here. We overdid it because we're not actually that good at this stuff that we think we are, because we're women, and that's just not how we see the world. So there's change going on right now. There's a corrective, but it will be corrective enough. It's hard to guess. My original prediction was that we would have a civil war and a restoration of the world wars, which would be a revolt against the Pax Americana that we've created, that has raised everybody out of prosperity. But that's because civilizations do that. You go through a phase where you get a core state that expands, and it goes from a core state to some sort of federation or empire. And this gets everybody working on common laws, systems, basically reducible to systems of measurement. And you work so you can cooperate at scale. But once you're able to take advantage of cooperation at scale, sorry, I got to get rid of this phone call. Cooperation at scale, you run into the problem that now that you have that advantage, you seek opportunities that are outside the interests of the collective. And so you seek individualization. So you see this concentration, contraction, redistribution of states over time, which is just a natural cycle of continuously seeking the available advantage. So in the sense of your first question, I think I answer. We know what the cause is. We know that it can't continue this way because it's destructive. The question then becomes, which pillars fall first, and which outcomes can we steer it towards or not steer it towards? I have more faith in Americans, I think, than I might wish I had. I always thought it would be us that blew up first, and then it would spread to Europe. But it looks like Europe is blowing up faster than we are, and that we're not special. Everybody's doing it is turning into something useful, and that's really due to the last 3 or 4 presidents have been not so good. Obama in particular pretty much did nothing except make people feel good. And the opposition, the remaining the remaining imperials that have not yet converted to federations, which is really what what you want to evolve into, of Islam out of Persia, Russia and their imperialism, which is understandable from their standpoint, and China from their standpoint. They're trying to play stupid games that are necessary when you're not necessarily satisfying the needs of your people, in order to maintain power, and they're just doing what you'd expect. But by withdrawing by withdrawing America from what they or American expression of demand, we actually created opportunity for them. What's kind of interesting is this administration is showing, well, if you want to exercise power, we actually can. And so can they restore Pax Americana, the world trade? Can we end the last institutions? I don't know. I think we could. I mean, it looks possible because, frankly, all we have to do is last long enough for Russian and Chinese population collapse to finish its cycle. But from the standpoint of our issue here, which is civilizational persistence through maintaining family and reproduction, the family, not the individual, is the core unit of civilization. I don't know why that seemed to get be missed by almost everyone. And I think that our family falling apart and our reproduction falling apart is actually the most severe threat. So can we fix it? Sure. The field of opportunities is out there. The field of consequences is out there. It's just, which kind of price do you want to pay? Do you want to show up and lose some money for 4 months while we hold 5 million people in Washington? Do you want to have a civil war, an insurrection that causes us to last for years? Do you want to have a civil war that most countries don't recover from? Do you want to have a world war because of the vacuum that's created by it? Or do you just want to get enough people to vote so we don't have to do any of the above? So it's not my goal as a professional. My goal is to produce a constitution and law and whatever that makes this kind of sedition against each other impossible, and makes government unable to conspire like most governments do in history, which is what my volume 1 is about. To gradually create elites that grow corrupt, and then people who feed elites go corrupt, and then the upper middle class grows corrupt, and then it just rolls downhill until nobody gives a shit, because they're all irresponsible, because responsibility isn't rewarded. So
now, how far do you think that is, and the loss of Pax Americana, how far do you think this is connected with what you described earlier, the dysfunctionality of women controlling the various workplaces and the reins of power, well as at the same time not, it's well known that it's very difficult to hold women accountable for that, as you say, this lack of responsibility. Are these connected, or is this just one? Is America just one more
I mean,
empire?
if you didn't have women voting, we would have never had a progressive president. It's just data. I mean, we don't have to think about it. It's women voters. And the problem is that since the sexual revolution happened, you have a bunch of females who men have to go through maturity phase because we're dangerous to each other. Women only can go through the same maturity phase if they have children that they're responsible for. So you only get a woman who thinks rationally after she's got a couple, 3 kids, especially if she's got 4 or 5. Right, but they'll vote conservatively because they'll be responsible, right? But when you do is you vastly increase the rate to marriage and first reproduction, and you vastly decrease the number of children, what you get is a surplus of women who tilt the tide. Because I mean, there's progressive men as well as progressive women, right? But you tilt the voting tide to the point where men can't outvote women. And women will dominate, elect people. I mean, women, if you look at the data, they'll vote for somebody because he looks better. Or it's not because the guy's smart or has good policies. And it's a lot of them. Or I have a woman I have worked with who I deeply care about. Just a typical Jewish American princess, but which if you're from Long Island, you got to know what I mean, right? I mean, come
All
on, I
right,
mean,
yes.
it's like a classic, right?
Okay.
We've worked together for 20 over 20 years. I love this woman, right? She's amazing, but she is your typical crazy chick when it comes to politics, right? She sees a fucking conspiracy under of men under every rock. She thinks men have all these, and it's funny, right? I mean, but she's just like a great example of she will actually explain to me the mind of the people that vote this way and act this way and believe this way, and it's just trait neuroticism. That's all it is. It's female trait neuroticism expressed.
I
Yes.
think there's one point I would maybe push back on. I could be wrong, but the data I've seen is that the women learn responsibility and, as you say, vote conservative if they have children and if they are married,
Oh yeah,
and
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I
and
apologize.
if they
Yes, I'm
remain
sorry.
married, because just having the children on their own does not seem to mature
No, it has no
the women
effect at
at
all.
all.
They actually become worse, and
Yeah,
they make really dysfunctional children, which is not helpful either.
yeah.
The men will remarry and create a balanced male female. So it's the same thing with kids. You know, you want to have you basically in an ideal say everybody have two brothers and two sisters, right? I mean, if you're a, you know, I mean, excuse me, there will be two brothers and two sisters because you tend to equalate. And I did some work on what women are like if they have been raised as single women or as just with sisters without brothers or if their brothers are much younger and they don't understand men at all. Whereas you don't want to mess with my sisters. They're scary, you know, because they had me as a brother, which was pretty terrifying, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. It's male female dynamics being what they are. Women should need to understand men. Men have been taught to respect women, but women haven't been taught to respect men, and they've done the opposite. It's become uh, the mean girl. The mean girl thing has become and men are evil has become the binding narrative for women who lack responsibility.
Yes. And also the video that you did with Noah Revoy, I mean, as I said before, I've been reading your content for years and watching your videos over the years as well. That video, We Must Fix the Sexual Market, I believe that was the title of it. It was a great discussion. And you talked about exactly what the title said, correcting the sexual market. Now, the sexual market right now is ruined. It is in free for all. It is nihilistic. It is a mess. So, uh,
I wouldn't want to be out there, man.
right. So, if we do not start enforcing some social norms, which might not even involve government, how can this get fixed without
Yeah, it's
socially?
just that's you know you've just made the issue visible. You can't enforce norms. You have to create incentives.
Well,
And so the incentives cause the norms, right, to evolve, right? A norm is a behavior in people. So we've created malincentives. I mean, the divorce fucking nightmare. I mean, common property in a world where women make more than men until men are 30, and then after 30, men like pay for the men 35 and older pay for 100% of government, right? And women, all women are net losses, right? We men pay for women to get shit on by women, both politically, economically, and socially and familially. And you know, as I've always said, well, you know, it'd be really nice if, of course, we had separate houses for the sexes. I'm playing this mind game, right? It's thought experiments, or not mind game, thought experiment. I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing. Anyway, the whereas sure, vote economic voting, vote your money. All right? Well, let's do that because at that point, I mean, it's all over. Because money is, we think of it as sort of things, but it's actually evidence of demonstrated competency, at least if it's obtained morally and ethically by trade, right? So you're just demonstrating the capacity to bear responsibility. So it's the same as a proxy for property. If you can't pay your taxes, or if you're a net cost to everybody, I don't know why the hell you have a say in anything.
I understand. Yes. Okay. So You've mentioned incentives. Now, to correct this, again, I'm not an expert, but historically speaking, there was matchmaking, arranged marriages, there was socially enforced monogamy, or at least there was the aim for that. So, what would be now, if were to fix the sexual market somehow, what would be the incentive for socially enforced monogamy, courtship instead of dating, and matchmaking? Could we just simply say to people, well, matchmaking is better. Your fathers, your brothers, your uncles can
You
actually
can't
judge
do it.
a
You
man.
can't do it because there's no way to enforce it. You can advise it, but there's no way to enforce it. All you can do is change, basically, end common property. No, end absence of liability for interference in a marriage. That would be the first thing to do, right? The minute we remove liability for interference in a marriage, I mean, what is marriage? It's a public event to demand by the public not interfere in this relationship, else the costs of that interference will be burdened by the community. That's what a marriage is for, right? Right? It's I'm making a contract with you for consideration, care, reproduction, and persistence, right? That's number one. So number two is do this thing. What Singapore does everything right. Make sure that your retirement, healthcare, whatever is dependent on the productivity of your children, right? So that you've got to produce productive children. You've got to have children and be productive. Number three is you've got to eliminate common property. So you eliminate no fault divorce. You restore liability for interference in the marriage. You restore fault in the marriage, and you eliminate common property, and you eliminate child support, and you eliminate alimony. When that happens, you restore the original incentives, which is the male trade for offspring, right? The male trade of resources for offspring and care. Despite females only practicing devotion in time and males practicing loyalty over time, which is a profound statement if you study that for a while. So we would have to make at least those. And I would, as strange as it sounds, I would just get rid of OnlyFans um, and dating sites altogether, and show you and say, yeah, you can go to in other words, you got to get a doctor or a therapist, right? That's licensed, right? We need to go back to people who arrange marriages, but you'd have to, in order to do that, you have to eliminate the alternatives. And the
Why
alternative would be
common property? You mentioned common properties, but why that?
because right now, and I'm speaking as a rich guy who's lost tens of millions on this, formerly, I just say formerly a rich guy because of divorce. You marry a woman and you're married for a couple of 3 years, and she decides that she wants half your shit. Once she has kids, right? She has cranks out a couple of kids. She wants half your shit. You just lost everything. I can't tell you what I lost my third marriage. I didn't lose a dime. We just agreed to go our separate ways. And my first marriage set me back to zero, and my second marriage, which was 20 years, it probably cost me more than 10 million.
So, but isn't an abolition of common property? Aren't you basically setting the marriage up for failure? I mean, it may be making the best of a bad situation, but isn't that
Why is that setting it? Go ahead, just explain it because the audience
well,
will
I mean, I
understand.
suppose that the other model I could think of would be common property, but with the man in charge of it, the man being responsible and with the elimination of no fault divorce, so that as long as the man maintains the solvent household, he is in charge of it, and the family remains intact and solvent.
Hard to hard to hard to make that case, I think. I don't think I think you would end up with less marriage if you did that. The point is that when you say there's no common property, you would just say, I paid for this, right? And you paid for your car, I paid for mine. I paid 80% of the house, so it's 80% my. That's all you'd have to do. You have to make it so a woman can't divorce her husband and take his assets with her, because that's
Yeah.
the problem. Because they're not loyal, they're only devoted. And men are loyal over time. We will bear burdens on behalf of one another. We'll even risk our lives on behalf of women. Women are not loyal. They're only devoted. And they're only devoted as long as their feelings are there and hypergamy hasn't interfered. Right? I mean, they are not trustworthy in general. Now, that doesn't mean all of them aren't. It just means in the distribution of women, you get very few that are trustworthy, and that's what the evidence says.
And none of the terms of divorce nowadays are not such that they can be held accountable. They
They
can be
treat us
held.
sexes as equal, and we're not. We're not equal. Men, I've written extensively about this. I have diagrams about it, but males are, we talk about cognitive differences as female empathizing in time and male systematizing over time. But that's just the beginning. That ends up with devotion versus loyalty. It ends up with consumption versus capitalization. It ends up with risk evasion versus risk pursuit. Because if men pursue risk and they govern it, they get status. Whereas women, they get status by not being responsible and in obtaining their wealth indirectly through a male. So you have this. We have there are the basic idea is that rule of law emerged out of this presumption that under law we are all equal. In other words, that's the but it's for men because we all have the same need for responsibility as a means of status and a means of capitalization and a means of obtaining sex and women and sex. But women don't have that need. They're intrinsically selling themselves, right? That's what they're doing. So women don't have that need, and they avoid responsibility because it exposes them to risk. They avoid responsibility because means they have to focus on systematizing intertemporal self-regulation when they essentially want to be and do seek to be driven by their impulses, their feelings, empathizing for it, which is useful when you have to raise infants because otherwise we just throw them all off cliffs because they're really freaking annoying.
Mm.
So it's wonderful that women have this great empathic delusion going on. All right, oxytocin is a gorgeous thing, but in the end, that does not mean that they are reliable. They are anything like men in the loyalty responsibility dimension, which is exactly the two dimensions that matter for political order at scale and division of labor. So the error is thinking men and women are equal. And this is a problem with rule of law as we've constructed it. We have created a rule of law correctly so that your status does not affect it, right? You don't have I don't have the, if I'm a rich guy, I don't have the right to dominate a poor guy, right? We're all both held to the same standards of reciprocity. But when you get into women, we don't hold them accountable and they don't hold themselves accountable. And there's seems to be a genetic predisposition in us to tolerate their irresponsibility.
So, what are the constitutional provisions that you propose? You mentioned that you are devising constitutional principles that will avoid these pitfalls. What could you give us some examples of what kind of things we're lacking?
Sure, the one you'll find most obvious. Of course, the one we've talked about, would you have to demonstrate responsibility for the franchise? You have to demonstrate a responsibility in some way for managing responsibility, or else you shouldn't have anything to say about responsibility and loyalty.
Now, one time that was two things I think were primarily required for the franchise, and one was property. And
well,
the
that
freehold
property is just demonstrated. That's just an empirical evidence of responsibility. That's all it is, right? It's not that you own the property. It's that if you own the property and you're holding on to it and you're paying taxes, then you're definitely showing responsibility for more than yourself. I mean
Well,
That's what
you're also not in dependency an employer or to
correct,
a
a
patron
patron,
or
yes.
to a patron
Yes.
of some you're not part of a patronage machine.
Right.
Uh, the other thing, though, that was also required for the freehold, for the at least in the Republican theory, in the American Revolution and sometime before that, was military service. The
Yes,
ideal
I
of the
agree.
militia, the citizen in arms. I mean, does that figure into your
Yeah,
um,
we used to have the female equivalent, which was the hospital side of things. And I think that would be, I haven't gone there yet because I'm trying to focus on the things you've directed me towards so far. But of course, you want a mandatory public service for both sexes. And we need to restore adversarial competition in both sexes. And I went to both a mixed school and a private Catholic boys' school. I went to Xavier Academy monks, right? Brother Xavier's. And the girls' academy was at the other end of the road, which was Sisters of Mercy. And it is way better to be in school with guys and have shared male female things than to have boys and girls in the same classrooms. It's a recipe, it's a recipe for dumbing shit down for guys and excessive suppression of male expression if the women are there. Then to answer your second question, I gotta tell my editor that he seems to not recall that I've had this meeting. Um, he's begging me. Is that it's you need to the education is part of it. The um, public service is part of it. And the legal part of it is the part that you hinted at and asked me to touch on what was specific. And that is that we have hyper suppressed male antisocial behavior to the point where we can't punch each other in the face anymore when we need it. And that's actually a mistake because sometimes a guy just needs a punch in the face, right? And right, he doesn't need to go to get killed or anything, but he just needs to understand that you're breaking the bonds of civic responsibility for your behavior, right? And you know, it works quite well. Speaking as a guy who grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I have chipped teeth down here from the fistfights I was in, and I don't figure they did me any harm, really. The harm they did was to my pride. Which sometimes needed a little adjustment, as you can imagine, because I'm a bit of a dick. Um, so, uh, so, but women, we haven't suppressed their antisocial behavior largely because women wouldn't let each other get away with it. And so, just as you ask a bunch of questions later on in your question list, that we are losing the men's ability to regulate one another by uh, essentially desocialization and atomization, hyper individualization. Um, we have licensed women antisocial behavior, and we've actually promoted it. So some of the most interesting research I feel I've done is not only sex differences in cognition, but sex differences in lying and manipulation. And holy shit, women are really good. Now, I mean, men make up stuff which we break into the categories of sophistry to idealism, magic to uh, uh, magic to pseudoscience, and uh, uh, was it magic to pseudoscience? Yes, and then it's supernaturalism to theology, right? So uh, we have men tend to work by deception by systematizing, which means we overload one another's cognition, right? Right. That's cognition we're overloading, right? Right. Women don't do it the other way. They basically undermine the shit out of each other, which is social undermining. And so what you end up with is a completely different set of uh, demonstrations of ignorance, error, bias, and deceit through undermining, which ended up being the master expression of canceling, right? With cancel culture during the during the teens. So we have not equally suppressed in the law female antisocial behavior as we have male. Now, the problem is men can control it, We can control, I'm not going to get out of hand here. The question is, can women control it? Well, they can if they have other women controlled, because women have a harder time with self-regulation. So they need external influence, right, of other women to force them to constrain it. So it's a harder problem to bring about, because you have to make it so that other women want to police other women for women's behavior, antisocial behavior, to be suppressed. But women are promiscuous. They use sex. They use undermining. They use deception. They
Well,
use manipulation. Right? They have all these games, and they're really good at it. And unfortunately, men are somewhat ignorant of. No, we're not tuned to pay attention to it. Anyway, go ahead. You're going to ask a question.
well, the other thing that women have done, I think in some ways, what women have done, even more than their behavioral differences and deviations compared to men, is they've they've created institutions that superseded your punch in the face. I mean, the punch in the face has been replaced, or more historically, the duel
Hmm.
has been replaced by the lawsuit, has been replaced
Yep.
by the courts. And courts are notoriously, as we know, anybody who's been through a divorce knows that courts are notoriously sympathetic
Female bias. Yep.
to women. And not only that, but not only divorce courts, but uh, probate courts and of course criminal courts. The women have what the women have done is they've created these institutions like the welfare state, the regulatory state, and the judicial state, which criminalize men for the punch in the face, the duel. The duel is now it's a crime, of course, and you
Well, you
can't
can't
do it. Or
slap him in the face either. And, I mean, Sean Connery's
right,
notorious for that statement. But, I have slapped two women in the face in my life, and they both needed it, and it worked just fine. It's just that you've crossed a line here that doesn't get crossed. That doesn't mean you beat the shit out of them or hit them with a fist or anything. But, for men and women, a slapping, I mean, a lot of cultures still do that. No, is it India in particular? Think it's India.
Humphrey Bogart as well as Sean Connery. Humphrey Bogart didn't take any nonsense from
You can
women, did
tell
he?
women that they're engaged, they're no longer responsibly self regulating. That's what a slap in the face does, right? It says you're no longer responsibly self regulating for civil behavior, and if you keep going on this, I'm not going to just slap you, right? I mean, because it's actually they're engaging in antisocial behavior, right? That's what it is. And I don't, the fact that we put up with it is somewhat amazing to me. But we do put up with it. You want to say something?
Yeah, well, that gets back to me because I've had some conversations with men offline in so-called real life and also online, is that what I notice, and I'm not saying I'm some type of tough guy here, is that I've noticed a moral squeamishness in many men, meaning we've had the talk here also. You suggested, let's say we could get rid of OnlyFans or get rid of dating apps or regulate other men. Usually the response I get from these suggestions that are similar to yours or identical to yours, for example, getting rid of pornography altogether, the most common answer that I've heard personally, I mean, this is an anecdote, is that we can't do that. We can't do that. No, you can't do that. And I'll say, well, others do it. We've done it in the past. Americans have done it. Why can't we do it? Do you notice this also, this hesitance to
Of
do
course.
anything about anything? So where
Yeah,
does
it's
this,
a very male thing. You don't ask, women wouldn't respond that way if it had to do, if there was something males did that offended women, they would gladly outlaw it. So it's
right?
just male presumption of self-regulation and female presumption of incapacity to self-regulate.
Right, but what I again I'm being repetitive here is that where does this come from? Where does this answer, this kind of echolalic statement, we can't do that. We can't do that. Things are terrible. OnlyFans is detrimental to society. Well, my suggestion will be, well, then we end it. They'll say we can't do that. Where does this come from? This defeatism.
It comes from it's ancient. It's the same thing. Okay, so I'm trying to not go down something that's complicated enough that I got to explain it for 10 minutes. Um, most of what women are actually doing as a technique is called baiting into hazard. Think of it as that's the abstract version of seduction, right? So when they're undermining you, what are they really doing? They're baiting you to do something, either come after them or they're baiting other men to do something about you, whatever. So the underlying strategy is baiting into hazard, whether it's positiva, seduction, heaping undue praise, which is how you are you into the Jewish history at all? Is that do you have any of that at all?
Not much knowledge on
No.
it.
All right. So if you understand, it's very so the only thing as sophisticated as Greek reason is Jewish argument, which is pill pull, rationalization, critique, undermining, and heaping in undue praise. It's essentially an institutional of female method, or what it means is if you lack military power, this is another way of changing society. So, women use those methods, and they're just as sophisticated as male methods of argument, but they're all destructive in the pursuit of undermining you rather than arguments that you can try to resolve. Anyways, I lost your question. I said if I go down this rat hole, I'm going to forget the question, and I did.
Societies did not tolerate this sort of.
No, they did. They didn't tolerate it at all.
I mean, even in America, we didn't tolerate pornography. I mean, wasn't that a series of court decisions that made pornography decriminalized it? So if we do this, if we did this, why can't we do it again? Why is there
absolutely can. There's nothing preventing it at all, right? Except doing it, right? There's a couple of things there's three things, and I hope I can get through them all together without forgetting one of them. The first is the ancient Western predisposition towards is that we don't tell you positiva what to do. We only have laws that tell you what not to do. If the law doesn't exist to tell you what not to do, then it's permissible, right? That's one. So we have a bias in favor of permissibility because it leaves judgment to the individual. That's our bias. That's Western bias. Nobody else does that but us. That's one of the reasons we're weird. The second one is, oh shit. I need your question again to hold on to all three of them.
Well, the question of perhaps I'm terming it incorrectly.
No, it's not you. It's the rat hole I have to go down to break these things apart and articulate them. And I haven't had enough coffee.
It's okay. It's all right.
So it's not you at all. It's all me.
Yeah.
So the first one is our culture of permissive. In other words, it's a permissive culture.
Yes.
You have the freedom to make a decision, but you bear the responsibility of non-imposition of costs on the demonstrated interests of others. That's Western culture in a nutshell. The second thing is we used to treat women as the source of evil. So you've heard of Pandora. Obviously, everyone has Pandora's box. You know, we've put women on a pedestal because we want them to act that way. It's not because they are that way. And so we've created this mythos, right, about women. But our ancestors knew you don't give women control of property. You don't let them participate in politics. You don't let them actually get involved in male things because they play all these stupid fucking games all the time. The Greeks wrote plays about it. I can't remember the name of it, the name of the one I'm thinking of in particular, but it's infamous for talking about what happens when women get in charge, right? I mean, their petty nonsense, is just outrageous, and the irresponsibility is even worse. we get into the Middle Ages, and what the crime I'm talking about, right? What I'm talking about was a crime under common law. And it falls into categories, a number of categories. The most common was called shrilling, right? Being a shrill, which is being a Karen. It was illegal. You could get put in the stocks for it, and when you were in the stocks, people would do things to you while you were in the stock. I mean, they were supposed to guard you and make sure they didn't, but the public humiliation was there. So, so
They put
what
a clip on your
happened?
tongue. The Puritans would put a clip on your tongue or put you in the
Yes,
ducking, put
yes,
the women in the
yes.
ducking stool.
Yes.
Oh, and we got Tabasco on our tongues when we were kids. If we did that, I don't know. But anyway, and then you got in. So what really happens? It's actually the progressive era. So we have the Industrial Revolution, and it causes chaos. On the other hand, what it makes humans believe is that, oh my God, there are no limits. We can do whatever we want now. We have dominion over ourselves, over nature. We have these machines, right? We can do whatever we want. The craziness of how deeply that cornucopia or unlimited behavior or humans are capable of ultimate sovereignty or ultimate wisdom. That vision of the anointed, as Thomas Sowell calls it, that is a product of the progressive response to, especially in America, as the virtue signaling my people, New England women. You gotta, I mean, there's still a pain in the ass today. Okay, let's just understand that. All right. New England virtue signaling puritanical women took that their cult into first getting women's vote, and then because that's why they voted for slavery, right? Women, they wanted slavery to be, I mean, the black franchise, they wanted to end slavery, but they were doing it so they could eventually get the vote themselves. And so this mission continues, right? So we end up with this utopian crap that comes out of northeastern female Puritanism, right? Rothbard does a great job of writing about this, by the way. It's fucking priceless. And he's a bit of a wit, so it's kind of funny. So you get this female progressivism comes up, and it just takes root. The newspapers take advantage of it. There, America has now taken over economic dominance from Europe. We're beginning to take over banking and credit dominance from Europe. And during the beginning of the World Wars, we take over military dominance from Europe. And so we got this sort of we are holy, we are destined nonsense, which gives, of course, the progressive movement, and it gets men voted for by women, right after the women get the vote, and it just goes downhill from there. Um, we get almost corrected in the Depression, but just the opposite. The responsibility got revoked, and irresponsibility got licensed. And then we got into the 50s, and we had this post-era peace, but it was somewhat false because the rest of the world was economically torched and burned. Like, I mean, they lit the capital of production of the world on fire during those world wars, and so we're the only ones left standing. So American workers are living way above their station, so to speak, and we get this another view of utopian cornucopia, limitless version, right? And the 60s come about, and now we've taken all those people who are one generation off the farm or the urban ghetto, or the ghetto is the wrong word, urban poverty, right? And we've moved them into home ownership and the potential for college education. And we produce a series of people who go in with this, younger people who go into the education system and then into the academy with these ideas. And then we have the Vietnam War that delegitimizes things, and we have the sexual revolution as a revolt against it. We have the 60s, the entire 60s was an unwinding of our previous moral and legal structures. And then we hit the 70s with the sexual revolution, but I don't know if you remember the 70s. I remember them all too painfully. And that was when our economic advantage expired. In other words, the rest of the world had caught up. So so in if you look at the world as a system, which is a field of study, right? Systems theory, um, what we're going through is just absolutely normal, predictable behavior of one group of people getting access or denial of a set of opportunities that it isn't necessarily due to them or their behavior. It's due to world events or national events that have had them excessively well off in the 50s and early 60s, less so in the 70s, restored under the credit expansion of the 80s, given the illusion of consumption power during the 90s because China had come on and reduced the cost of consumer goods. And then we hit the 2001, which is a crash of it, right? And right now, and this is literally what everybody's depending on: repatriation of industry, robotics for labor, and AI for knowledge, right? If they're betting the future on that we can do those three things, I'm like, that's really good. Why don't you worry about who's doing this? Because it's not happening.
Well,
Right? I
Exactly.
mean,
That's exactly right.
right. Well,
That's exactly right. It's amazing. It's amazing how we compartmentalize things, and we can have these discussions about high politics and high economics without any consideration of who controls the reproductive system and what they are doing with it. And it's just it's just madness.
yes, but you see, but this, you two are right in what you say. It's spot on with that. Is that I mean, I am focusing on more. I mean, to get back before we go or wrap this, we have some more.
You're just begging me to say something like you're trying to get Blade more. Is that what you're saying?
No, no. I'm married with I'm married with two kids. I am out of the market. I am happily married.
I know that. I couldn't let it go. It was there. It was like
Yeah, I know you're saying. Well, I'm concerned about what men are doing because we could have these talks about some of the audience is older. I mean, if I go to YouTube analytics, I see many men from age 35 to 70, but there are also many men, unfortunately now. I would believe in a healthy society that people would just be off the market by their 30s and 40s, and this wouldn't be an eternal discussion. We had a conversation with Roger Devlin, and I think that he put it correctly in that in a healthy society, this sexual obsession would not be there because young people would be focusing on courtship, or I don't like to use the word dating, and they would just morph into dad, morph into mother. And now we have this disordered sexual market where people are in the market until who knows when. And to get a hold of this, I mean, do you have any advice of what men should do? Any advice on male networking? I mean, it just seems that, I mean, people are concerned about the fertility rate. How do you get fertility up if many men cannot even get a date? How would this be fixed?
Okay, so female, you have to blame the women on one hand, right? And then you got to blame the men on the other, right? So one
Yes.
is we have offshored the income. Then we're going through the greatest restoration of industrialization since the Second World War. Right now, it's amazing. I knew that was the goal, but the rate at which it's happening is not talked about enough because it's amazing, right? So we have to repatriate industry so that men can earn money instead of. But so what we've done is we've bought cheap consumer goods at the expense of men making decent salaries. I mean, that's really the net result of it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we have to fix that the end labor arbitrage so that men can make decent incomes. The second thing is it is very apparent that college education doesn't matter, especially for women who take gut courses. Now, women dominate, but they don't dominate anything meaningful. They dominate the stuff that you got to be stupid to do, like education. I mean, educators are from the bottom 16th of your class. I mean, that's 16% of your class, right? That's terrible, right? Sociology, psychology, all this other stuff, it doesn't, there's no meaningful in it, and it doesn't pay. Matter of fact, if you go for women, anything in social science, anything like that, it actually lowers your potential income. So what we've done is we've created this necessity. Instead of 10% to 20% of our population needs a college education, we've actually dumbed down high school. And we've eliminated the jobs programs that Germany has everywhere. In other words, the relationship between industry and government. And we've pulled away sports, which is how to build teamwork so you can work in a community. And we've pulled away the military indoctrination, which is how you really get so you take responsibility for others. And then we've made this college experience, which is basically partying and dating, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. And so when only about, if you just went through what percentage of the population has an IQ over 115? Well, it's actually a pretty small number. Then why don't we spend 50% of people to go to college? You don't need to go to college. You might need a year of education in a discipline, right? You can learn accounting in basically 2 years. You don't need a 4-year education for it. And what's moreover, you don't need all that. You don't need $100,000 worth of debt. So you take young people and you put them in where male income is depressed because of outsourcing or labor arbitrage. You combine that with education debt, right? You combine that with females going into white collar work that was only made possible by the computer revolution, which is reversing right now because most of the people are going to be unemployed over the next 10 years are going to be women. Right? You go and they want a guy who's also of white collar status. Well, I mean, for a men, you don't make money at low end white collar status. That's for women. You got to go into the blue collar applicant because if you're an electrician, you know how much money you make? It's insane. I mean, if it was me and I was a kid today, if some kid asked me, says, "Dude, I'd go into specialties welding, right? You only have to work like every 4 hours a week, and you make 3 times, or what you make for going on an oil rig, right? I mean, it's like you make like I don't know. It's so stupid. I can usually roll it off my head, but I'm too excited talking to you right now to remember. So, so the problem is we have made an artificial class division between men and women. We've created a debt system that was unnecessary, and the real reason we have to use college degrees is because they've outlawed IQ and personality tests in hiring. Right? That's actually the reason. Or if you gave back employers IQ, and they'd just hire people off the street. They can't do that though because it's not legal. But that's actually what you're doing. You're using college and college degree and college selection as a proxy for IQ. So it's a little bit of conscientiousness testing in there, but that's easy to fix. So
you've also, of course, the other problem, of course, is you flooded the workplace with women. I mean, this is the other reason that men can't get living wages.
Well, and the women undermine the men in the workplace, and they do HR centric stuff, and so right. Male bonding's inhibited. I tell people who work for me, they usually they make a lot of money, right? So I'm not in that business anymore, but I run high-end consulting, so. You and I got women working for me that are making 350, 450, 500 grand a year, right? Well, they want to sit on the board or have a seat at the table. And I'm like, you're great at that job. You bring in a lot of money. But what evidence do I have that you can make an adult decision about other people, about our investors, our employees, our vendors, and our management? What? They can't. And I was on a board of a public company quite a few years ago, and I was like, these two women, they're actually detrimental to this organization. I know why they got brought in, so they'd have women on the board and so that they would be able to take advantage of those women's relationships. Yeah, but they were detrimental to this board because we couldn't have honest conversations with them there. And so you got to remember in consulting, I'm using transformation. So I'm the guy that goes into your business and says, you go in the business and spends, 6 months trying to figure out why Microsoft can't pull its head out of its ass, or, so you go into these organizations and you find out that there's 3 women over here that have got that the CEO, who's the founder, listens to, and they manipulate the fuck out of, and everything they say is wrong. They just undermine everybody competition for his attention. I'm like, look, guys do this, but we threaten to punch each other in the face over it, right? And we settle it. We settle it. But women just get away with it, murder. So I've just watched women destroy women destroy, especially each other. Women destroy management of companies, etc. And there are women who are successful, but they're successful in female consumer related brands. If you hire a woman as a CEO, it's almost evidence that your management, your board is no longer functional, and there's too much internal conflict because your company's in decline. HP is my favorite example I give to people. So
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too is the dynamic you're describing is not only taking place in companies, it's also taking place in the state, the government is taking place. We have a lot of discussions here about how it takes place. The same dynamic is taking place in the
yep,
churches, all of the
yep,
churches,
yep.
and in the economy, and in I mean, virtually any organization. Who was it? Was it Roger Scruton is credited with saying that any organization um, that is well, there's two sayings. One is any organization that is not explicitly left wing, sorry, that it's not explicitly decidedly right wing, will eventually become left wing.
Yes.
And the other principle is that any organization into which you admit women is going to be taken over by the women. And I think that's, those two principles are not
Right.
separate. They're kind of the
No, I
same
agree with
principle.
you. I just want to amplify it and say
So,
that I'm not the only person saying this right now, but and someone rather famous said this relatively recently again, which is our legal profession will not survive majority women in it. If you look, one of the things my organization does is, of course, our real job is to prevent. We basically only need to write a letter and people stop, right? That's what we do, right? Because you don't want to go to court with us against us. That would be a bad thing. So, but one of the things we do is we track the judges who do not adjudicate according to the law. They adjudicate to personal preference. And you know what? They're all fucking women. All right.
yeah, or they're under pressure by women. Um, yeah, Curt, this has been a fascinating discussion. I've really enjoyed this.
Yep,
Bradley,
you
I
guys
just
are
wondered
fun.
if you had anything else that you wanted to add or question, or I
Oh
mean, I
yeah.
could
Well, I
go on.
mean, I
I could
don't
go
feel
on
like
about this.
you got a lot of stuff you asked me, and we barely touched it.
I know,
So,
but
Well,
I know, but usually, well, we usually keep it to like a reasonable time frame, but we can talk to, again, I enjoy talking to you. We don't,
yeah, I think
yeah,
yeah, I think another show would be good.
I think
yeah.
we should do
Um,
another show because you said. I mean, honestly, it's just for the audience. A lot of people really have no business running shows because they don't actually tell you what they want to talk about or what their mission is. These guys are awesome.
Thank
Really.
you.
I got this is what we want to talk about. These are the issues, whatever. This is what to look at for other chats we've had. That I wasn't like they contacted me not the day before or 2 days before and I had to scramble. They gave me time, right? And so you don't find I mean, you guys, if you had a fancy studio behind you, that would be more indicative of the quality of management of your guests that you provide. And that's my way of complimenting you.
Thank you very much.
well,
I mean,
thank you.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I was really glad to speak to you because I've read consumed your content for years, and I am also fascinated by your wealth of knowledge in many areas. It's fascinating, and but before, just to wrap it up, is what I want to get to maybe a little bit for a few minutes here, or maybe next time. But I wanted to focus more on, let's say, in the next show, perhaps more about male development, because I wanted to get around to forming men's own networks, considering that many of us grew up fatherless or in broken homes, including myself. Also, in the lower middle class that I grew up in, no strong male role models anywhere, and especially in the lower middle class,
Correct.
no men, pretty much no men,
Yep.
period. So we're in a position right now where men are going to have to form their own networks. I mean, we have this problem here. I mean, I think the research, I believe it actually is that men are atomized. They are left to their own
Individuated.
devices. They have to approach everything as an individual. They have no family business to work for. They have to approach getting employed as an individual. They have to approach mating as an individual. They have to approach all of life as an individual. And I believe that this is really hurting men these days. I mean,
Certainly.
back in the 90s, how did you meet other men, and how did you even meet a woman? You left your house. You know, I'm from New York City. Well, where were women? Many men are now asking, where can I find a woman? In the 90s, I don't know, you left your house. You went outside. There
Yeah,
were,
exactly. Yeah,
so, I mean, I would like to get into this next time. Is that but
absolutely.
before that,
Absolutely.
can you? I mean, I would like Noah's input on men forming their own networks. I mean, they
Okay.
could,
So
yeah,
so there's yes, and then there's wishful thinking. So we have a group, we try to do this, right? But the leadership is what's necessary, and the problem is we haven't produced guys who can lead a group. And so it's actually training the leadership to do that. The Marxists do this really well, by the way. That's why left activism is so good, is they focus on them. They focus on it. They actually have a leadership sort of discipline within leftism that started by Alinsky, Russell Alinsky. Um, so what we notice is that we can lead something. We can occasionally find, like the guys we have in Spokane, they're unbelievable. They've like got guys together and bought a bar, and then they just kept going, right? Um, and so, but it's because there's a leader, because men don't want to be in conflict over decisions. They need somebody who will take the role of decision maker, and that person has to be confident. So when you're saying what you're saying is, yes, we need that. There are a field of ways to do that, and in our next conversation, if we have one, I'll try to talk about how we can make that happen. But in general, what we look at is we have to find a way to make leaders who are capable of. No, you don't have to be like I'm an ego thing. Just have a process in place so that you can produce outcomes. Um, and you'll get people to join it. It's not terribly difficult. It's just men have been so atomized that they don't even know how to compromise with other males without feeling it's a status imposition of themselves, because they have been so status deprived by lack of interaction with other males that they overvalue what self-image they have for status. In other words, they're living. It's very psychologically damaging. So I almost feel like you can't fix it unless you put guys in the military, right? I mean, it's very difficult, but you can fix it. It's possible. So we should have that discussion.
yes, yeah, that would
I
be
agree.
great. Yes,
I
yeah,
agree.
yes,
Well, thank you very much for this. This has been great.
Love you
yes,
guys. You're awesome. Had a fun time. Uh, we could do this for hours, I assume.
yes,
Anyway,
yeah. So, yes, thank you for being with me today, and to the audience, subscribe to the channel again for the best in men's issues and sexual politics. Thank you for being with me today, with us rather, actually. Yes. Okay. Bye.
and comment.
Okay.